Infinity Train was a series created by Owen Dennis for Cartoon Network in 2019. With high praises for the show, its cancellation hurt, but the shadow removal from HBO and Cartoon Network not only shocked me and other fans, but Owen Dennis himself. But why? And just how good were the seasons that did get released? Howdy, I'm Butter, and I'll be your conductor of this tour into the abandoned world of Infinity Train. Now, I first watched this show back in 2022, around the time it and a bunch of other cartoons were taken off of HBO Max and erased from other official locations on the internet. Since then, I've been following this series and its creator, crossing my fingers, just hoping some good news will arise. Unfortunately, that isn't the case. But I figured that since I talk about cartoons on this channel, with my most popular video being about another Cartoon Network show, I may as well. Plus, spoiler alert, I like this show more. This one's going to be structured just a bit differently. I want to talk about each book or season of the show and point out the things I love, and sometimes the things I don't, and give a general synopsis of each story, since there's only like 10 episodes per book. It's also a more linear show, which helps. Similar to my Steven Universe video, I'm going to split up each book with sections about various topics surrounding the show. Also, I'm gonna spoil the show. Come back to this video once you've seen the full series. And if you're watching this video to convince you to check it out, it's your loss not experiencing it blind, but that's not up to me. Also, if you like this video, click the button that tells me that. Or don't. I literally can't force you. Book 1 tells the story of Tulip's time on the train and sets up a lot of the show's concepts and themes. The train's purpose is to help people with their problems by having them travel through an infinite amount of different cars to spark a journey of self-discovery. Ultimately, it's up to the passenger, whether or not they actually discover. In Tulip's case, she does. Right off the bat, you learn that her parents are recently separated and that it makes her really uncomfortable to think about. This immediately hooked me the first time I watched it. Divorce is something I personally haven't seen in a show like this, so it definitely caught me by surprise. You know what else stood out to me immediately? The music. It's very nostalgic and comforting with a little bit of uneasiness to it. I'll just take the time now to say that the music in this show is very good. I very much enjoy it. It adds so much to the storytelling and the feelings of each scene. Tulip gets frustrated with her parents' inability to take her to game design camp, so she decides to make the 300-mile trek on foot.
300 miles is not a quick hop.
And oh yeah, that cold open is so good. She boards the train under the impression that it'll take her to camp. It does not do that. She does not make it to camp. She wakes up, meets 1-1, a little robot sphere with dual personalities, and begins her journey. She travels through a bunch of cars trying to figure out how to make her number go down and meets her other traveling companion Atticus, King of Corginia. We meet recurring characters like Randall, We Stan Randall, Team Randall, always be there for each other, and the Cat, a mysterious character who seems to know a lot about the train. She appears in episode 2, but she has a much more interesting role in episode 5, which is perfect. Episode 5 of Book 1 is my favorite episode of the entire show. Genuinely, watch this show up to episode 5, and if you're not hooked by then, we cannot be friends, I'm sorry. Full spoiler alert. Last chance, please, watch it. Now, I'm just gonna detail that scene from episode 5 and why I like it, skip ahead to the time on the screen if you don't want to listen to it, but oh my god, it's so good. The whole episode is her kind of like reliving her memories through a tape, and the entire time she's like, "Ah, man, I love that day. Ah, that was so fun. Wait, I don't remember that. Things are a little off." And it's like, it's so fucking creepy. Like, they get the horror vibes down so right. It's like the perfect amount of horror. The scene where she's like sitting next to the couch and you can hear like faint voices in the background and you're like, oh, something's fucking wrong here. So when she figures out that things aren't how they're supposed to be and we cut back to that scene, and it's not just her sitting next to a couch, it's her like tucking in her dad while he's crying. Like, it's so fucking sad. Dude, and best of all is the scene where like Tulip's parents are confronting her about their separation. At first it's scary, there's fire everywhere, there's a flaming dog, her parents are fucking demons or whatever, and they're screaming divorce. But then everything cuts away, including the sound. It's so fucking important that there is no music or like background noise, it's just Tulip and her parents. as she walks through this ring of fire.
Oh, this isn't what happened either! We having dinner here or going out?
Neither. We just want to talk to you.
And the entire time with Past Tulip, you can tell that she's known for so fucking long, and she's trying to, like, avoid it. She's trying to escape. She brings up, like, ordering food and tries to go call someone to bring food, and it's fucking sad. And it's incredibly well done, man. And the fact that, like, present Tulip's lines are just mimicking what her parents are about to say, it's so fucking good. It's so good. God. Fuck, I love this show. All right, we can continue. I think that fulfills the just talk about that one scene in episode 5 line I have written. In that same episode, we meet the conductor, who is a very important character that I'll talk about near the end of this part. After that, we meet MT, Tulip's reflection, in the chrome car who escapes from the Flex, or Mirror Police, with the help of her prime counterpart. I'm detailing this specifically because it's very important. Then, after having a silly time in a McDonald's play place, it all gets destroyed by the conductor, and Atticus gets turned into a gome. A feral, soul-sucking dog-cockroach hybrid, and it fucking hurts every time I watch it.
Atticus!
Then we learn that the conductor, Amelia, isn't actually the true conductor, and she took it over to bring back her dead husband. By putting off her way home, Tulip decides to fix Atticus by taking on Amelia and zapping him back to normal. We also learn that 1-1 is the real conductor. Tulip heads home, and that's where we wrap up the first book. Before I get into my criticisms, I'm going to talk about the things that I like about it, other than the music and the story, which I've kind of already touched on. Tulip's character arc is great, and genuinely, I don't think there is like a better way to start this series. It's a grounded, reality-based concept that like a lot of people go through and feel, while also getting you used to the train. So that way, seasons 2 and 3 specifically are very like familiar still. I also really like the art for the show. The characters are fun and like really charming. The environments are incredible. The opening scene where Tulip's running away through all these environments, like it's such a striking moment in the series to me. And it's not even fucking on the train, so good job, I guess. I don't know. Now, I do have two main criticisms of this first book, the first of which being pacing issues. The story pacing is fine, especially considering it's, that 11-minute, 10-episode season, but some scenes go by just a bit too quickly, and some lines just don't have much room to breathe.
It's the best game I've ever made.
How many games have you made?
1.
To me, it's the most notable within the first couple of episodes, but once you get to like episode 4, that kind of seems to dissipate a little bit, which is good. The second thing I have is Amelia's spite for Tulip. She goes out of her way to make her suffer instead of just getting rid of her altogether. Although, she is an emotionally broken character, so it's not the end of the world. I am a bit hung up on a third thing, and that's Atticus's revival. The argument against it online is that it counters Tulip's entire arc with her needing to face the facts of her parents' separation. Tulip not accepting Atticus dying seems to go against that point, but I personally saw it as her not running away from how she feels or thinking around it. At home with her parents, she would like hide herself in her room and focus on her coding to like kind of drown it out. But when it came to Atticus, she didn't run. She didn't leave to go back home to a world where Atticus wasn't a gome. She stayed and wanted to actively fix the problem. That's something I'd like to hear from you in the comments. It's kind of up in the air for me. I've heard both sides of the argument, I guess. Other than those points, I think it's an incredible first season and I enjoyed it a lot. Now before we get into season 2, let's take a detour and talk about the years before the first season even aired. The pilot episode came out on Cartoon Network's YouTube channel in November of 2016, but Dennis actually originally came up with the idea over half a decade earlier. In this article from the LA Times, he said it came to him during a flight in 2010. There's this part of the ocean that's really big and quiet, and it's very still. The plane was flying over that section, and I'd woken up. I looked around, and there was a bunch of people staring into screens in the dark in this quiet room. I thought this was kind of creepy, and it sort of started from there. I'll link that article in the description as it goes over a lot of his personal experiences that influenced the show. The pilot, which would be morphed into the storyline for Book 1, Episode 3, The Corgi Car, eventually released online and later on the Cartoon Network channel. And it was a smash hit. It apparently accrued over 5 million views, which really cemented it into becoming an actual series. However, it's not visible anymore. It's since been privated on YouTube, but I'll get to that later. I'm also going to link this Animation Magazine article because it goes super in depth into the processes and inspirations for this show. Dennis talks about his history with programming and his love for point-and-click games, citing Myst quite often, which I can see directly impacting the look and feel of this show. Eventually, almost a decade after it was conceptualized, Infinity Train aired its first episode on August 5th, 2019. Hey, remember what I said about MT, that mirror tulip? Yeah, she's the main character of Book 2. And it's fucking genius, honestly. Setting up a side character to make them the main character later is incredible for retaining familiarity. Also, her character arc of self-discovery and her idea of what that's supposed to be like is well done, and it provides a fresh take in comparison to Book 1. Which also mimics the differences between Tulip and MT. In the first episode, we see that she's still being hunted by the Flex, who act as the main antagonists of the season. She also meets two characters, Jesse and Alan Dracula. Jesse is her foil in the show, but that doesn't mean he's a side character. He's got his own problems to work through, with his people-pleasing nature causing harm to himself and others around him. And it's really fun to watch his growth. Alan Dracula, on the other hand, is perfect. He is a character that needs no development because every moment he has is flawless. The first book was primarily based around setting up the train's lore and having Tulip figure out her own problem, but this one has a bit more emphasis on the relationship between Jesse and MT. Now that's not to say the development of these two separate problems aren't important, but their issues commingle very well despite them being two very different people. Like I said earlier, the Flex act as this main opposing force to our main characters, but they are just exactly the same as they were in Season 1. There's also the Parasite, who is annoying, but in a villain way. Unfortunately, the only thing I can think about when it comes to this character is the drag show car where they tried to make Alan Dracula hot. The whole character is overshadowed by that one moment. Sorry, Perry. Hey, the cat's back, and she's horny for Jesse?
Well, I think I know what a handsome young passenger like Jesse might need.
Why? We're also introduced to Grace, Simon, and the Apex Kids. They're a group of passengers who see the train as a sandbox for them to rule and treat the denizens poorly, and the reason I'm detailing them is because they will be important later. Jesse gets his door and tries to take MT with him, but he can't and disappears. Then, after a desolate and gruesome episode with one of the dying cops, we learn a bit more about the process between boarding the train and waking up in the first car. The visuals here are pretty cool. I think the floating tape reels add a nice flair to something that could have just been dumbed down. Also, these guys are so fucking cute. I've got some good news and some bad news. Bad news, MT can't get a number. But good news, 1-1's back. And so is Jesse. He boards the train again and causes it to malfunction and shut down. Eventually, MT thinks of a solution to the number problem, and they both exit together. The last thing I'll note is the ending that's been building up this whole book, MT choosing a name. It was part of her character that she went by other names and titles, but once she's escaped to her new life, she chooses the name Lake. At first, I wasn't super crazy about it. I thought it was kind of lame that the first thing she chose was just the thing that she was looking at, but mixing in the shot of her reflection that she no longer has to fear, and the fact that her first moments in her new life were in front of a lake, I like it. Overall, this book is at least on par with the original. I might even like it a little bit more, I don't know. Again, the villains really only seem to exist to create urgency to move the characters along, which was fine in the episode in Book 1, and even the first few episodes of Book 2, but it definitely got a bit stale as the season progressed. Also, there aren't as many standalone scenes that stood out to me, like the cat car tape scene, Amelia's backstory, and Atticus' sacrifice. I did like the writing, and the pacing seemed a bit more consistent, which was nice. Now to get a little sad. The show unfortunately only ran for 4 seasons. Originally it was supposed to be 8 books long. It was apparently cancelled after book 4 due to a lack of child entry point, and I fucking hate that that's the reason. Fuck HBO, animation is an art form that anyone and everyone can enjoy, and it deserves as much respect as any other medium. Sorry, this topic gets me fucking heated. The show's cancellation wasn't actually an unfamiliar occurrence. There was a lot of worry back when the third season was released. In a tweet posted during the airing of Book 3, Owen shared that the crew had been laid off, and the only way the show would continue is if people watched the show, specifically citing teens and young adults. And clearly, it worked. According to this Observer article, Infinity Train was the 4th most watched show on HBO Max in 2020. As you know, a 4th season released, so clearly people watched it. And although I don't have any demographic stats, I think it's safe to say that the show did pull in a large amount of older viewers, just by the fact that it was picked up for a 4th season. And even more so with the main reason for the ultimate cancellation being a lack of child entry point. The reason they stopped production on the show is because the show was trying to tell stories for everyone. There's plenty there to make a kid interested in the show, but the fact that the audience became mostly made up of teens and young adults is a negative to the execs is so aggravating. You want to know the reason why it didn't retain more of a younger audience? It switched off the lineup for the well-known Cartoon Network channel and onto a brand new streaming service that wasn't exactly selling subs for its kid-friendly content. But that's just a theory.
A streaming service theory.
This news pissed a lot of people off. It pissed people off to the point where they got hashtag Finish Infinity Train trending at #1 with over 300,000 tweets in a day. There was a lot of support, and even still today, the community still drums up these trend parties in support for the series. The last thing I'll comment on is the super in-depth article from Inverse after the show was fully cancelled. It goes over Owen Dennis's plans and projects for the show that were never fully realized, including comics, video games, and even a full VR experience set in Corginia. There's also a lot of information about the state of the animation industry and how it can change. At the bottom, there's a very important message that I think everyone should hear. Don't be embarrassed about liking animation. Book 3 is about some familiar faces. You see the pattern. I originally found it hard to like these folks. These characters are mean and evil, and while I did come around to their arcs, it was still just a little bit sour. On rewatch, however, yeah, I like it. It's very good. The Apex's whole thing is that they hate 1-1 and worship the true conductor, which is Amelia, but they don't know that. And their goal is to try to get the highest number possible. They raid cars, destroy shit, and murder denizens by crushing them under train wheels.
It's nothing. Just something to play with when we're bored. And honestly, you're boring me. Wheel it or whatever.
That's why it's very hard to root for these characters. The setup of this book is actually pretty simple. The leaders of the Apex get separated from their base car and have to make their way back. I'm going to talk about the twist early here because it's very important to my enjoyment of this season. It starts with Grace being the most aggressive and set-in-stone character, with Simon being more unsure and kind of dynamic. But as the season progresses, Grace ends up breaking down her barriers while Simon takes his opportunity to step up to her level. So as I watched this originally, I was constantly annoyed by Simon and felt better towards Grace, but I was so uncertain and a little disconnected from it all. Then, when I rewatched it knowing the twist of Simon being the ultimate antagonist, I actually really liked how it happened. Grace's development comes from Hazel, a girl whose number is broken. She lives with Tuba, a gorilla who lost her kids a while back. Tuba doesn't like Simon and Grace because they try to induct Hazel into the Apex. I don't know exactly why they're so hellbent on manipulating and gaslighting little kids into their Lord of the Flies cult, but goddamn do they do it perfectly. And by they, I mean Grace. Simon is just way too fucking blunt. Grace opens up to Hazel, and Hazel helps with their situations, teaching them to dance, make snowballs, and helping Simon and Tuba get along better. All the while, Grace learns empathy and starts to understand her own issues. I didn't pick up on a lot of the details when I first watched, so for sure rewatch this season if you haven't. And heyo, the cat's back. And her role in this season is great. There's so much payoff for how she acts in the previous seasons. Except for the thing with Jessie. I still don't understand that. She was Simon's original companion, and in the event that caused them to become separated, Simon gained trust issues and a hatred for denizens, and the cat, or Samantha, became very sentimental and protective. Speaking of Simon, what's he doing now? What's that? Murdering Tuba? essentially throwing Hazel's mom under the train wheels.
You never have to worry about that null again.
Is she?
Yeah, I wheeled her.
There is no rooting for him. Also, Hazel's a denizen. Whoa. I mean, it's foreshadowed as hell because she doesn't have a real number and all she's done is help lower Grace's, but still. Whoa. Double whoa, Amelia's back. She's studying anomalies in the car for 1-1 and basically just searching for Hazel. My god, this season is so dramatic. And dense. I got to episode 5 and I was like, oh man, we're coming up on the end. Halfway? Jesus. Simon learns about Hazel and Grace is struggling with the path that she wants to go down. Pretty quickly after though, Hazel just leaves with Amelia. Then Simon forcefully picks through Grace's memories and we come to understand everything that the Apex stands for is from Grace. Her perspective of the train and her own preconceived notions of the conductor and the numbers founded the entire basis of the Apex. And when Simon sees that it's all wrong, he doubles down and says that Grace has lost her way. I really like their conflict and dynamic that develops over the season. Now, as far as the finale goes, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells because it's the highest rated episode of the show and one that I've seen a lot of people praise. Now, don't get me wrong, I think it's an incredible episode and it does a lot right, but I also think there are a couple of discrepancies that I have to mention. Number one, Simon's number is immediately higher than Amelia's. It took years for her number to get like that, and for Simon, it took probably a couple of days. Now, I can't see it from the point of a character being on the verge of no return. It just kind of happened a bit too fast, and it also kind of brings down the impact of Amelia's number. But I do like how you watch him fully break as his numbers cover his face. That makes perfect sense to me. Like, he's fully lost it and there's no saving him. But I feel like it would have been more satisfying to watch his number climb as him and Grace fight, rather than it already being up to his neck the moment we see him again. The other thing is Grace's immediate good karma payoff. She was fully nice to denizens for the first time ever, I'd assume, and that's what gives her the upper hand. It's very nitpicky and I genuinely don't know how to feel about it, so let me know your thoughts in the comments. I do very much like that this season didn't end with a door. There's still growth that needs to happen, but you know it will because of all that's happened up to the end. Simon is a step up when it comes to antagonists, but again, it's hard to have any kind of empathy towards him when he just straight up murders denizens. With Amelia, it took so long for her to whittle away her humanity, but with Simon, he was abandoned once and then just started murdering people. Grace did too, but not for a single moment in this entire series did Simon feel that, you know? He showed absolutely no remorse, so any kind of emotional scene for him really just didn't click with me. He's a great character, just in a really hateable way, which is probably what they were going for, and is one of the biggest reasons why Grace can still be seen as a protagonist. Alright, this section's gone on for long enough, so I'll just say that it's right under the other two books for me, but on my next rewatch I could definitely see it moving up. I just personally think it's a slow burn. Brewing all throughout 2021 were talks of the companies Warner Media and Discovery merging together, creating further business opportunities for the two. In April of 2022, the two came together to create Warner Bros. Discovery. This business move caused a lot of skepticism and unease as things began to shift and change. Fast forward a couple of months to August 17th, when it was announced that with the merging of Discovery Plus and HBO Max, over 35 shows would be fully removed from the platform, providing the following explanation. As we work toward bringing our content catalogs together under one platform, we will be making changes to the content offering available on both HBO Max and Discovery Plus. That will include the removal of some content from both platforms. It is an explanation. A very, very empty explanation. According to multiple people behind the shows that were removed, no warning was given to these actions prior to the announcement. These creators watched as their hard work, passion, blood, sweat, and tears were all thrown away. The creator of the show Summer Camp Island tweeted about how much effort it took to make the show, and how over the pandemic the team worked on creating more episodes that were then stuck in limbo. Fortunately for them, those episodes and other previous ones were aired on Cartoon Network this summer. Infinity Train, however, didn't really make it anywhere. The show was pulled and hasn't been seen anywhere new since. It's still on paper episode places like iTunes, YouTube, Amazon, etc., but the ease of access of a streaming service or constant eyes of a cable channel just isn't there. Many have guessed that maybe they'd sell the streaming rights to another platform like Hulu or Netflix, like some other projects, but there's been no news of that. Going back to the removal, it came as a shock to everyone, and fans were rightfully upset by it. Infinity Train shot up to #1 on Twitter, the show topped iTunes charts, the market for physical media exploded, and fans were petitioning it to either be put back on the platform or, more recently, be given to Owen Dennis so he can pitch new books to another company, or at least give it an easily accessible home. One of the strangest parts of this entire thing is its complete erasure from official social media pages. Tweets on the Cartoon Network and HBO accounts, Instagram posts, official YouTube clips, and even the soundtrack were removed. Most of the YouTube videos are back, save for the pilot for whatever reason that is, and the soundtrack is back as well, which almost makes it weirder. It begs the question, why remove them in the first place? References to the show have also been made on official Cartoon Network accounts since then, but to my knowledge, the show hasn't appeared on the channel itself post-merger. It's such a confusing and unfortunate ordeal that we may never get an explanation for. All I know is that HBO Max, just Max, isn't doing that well. They're talking about finally turning profits, but that's after removing shows, selling streaming rights, cutting funding, and factoring in the Discovery Plus audience. And I truly doubt that when a mixture of the rebrand and Succession ending caused a 600% increase in cancellation traffic on their site. Anyway, back to the show. So, following the pattern of the other books, who do you think the fourth one's about? Maybe Amelia and Hazel because they still have stories to play out? Or one of the Apex kids after they change their ways? Maybe it's focused on the cat or 1-1. Huh? It's just two random guys? And there isn't much overlap from the previous seasons? Alright. Cool. If you couldn't tell, this was my least favorite season of them all, and I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I do immediately want to recognize that this was like a down season before a huge storyline in book 5, but unfortunately, that didn't get greenlit. Instead of ending on a narrative high, it stopped after the least lore important season of them all. But that's not to say it was bad. I still think there's a lot of good stuff here, especially the whole first episode. I love the simultaneous storytelling, and the transition from the split shot is so fucking cool. We also learned that this season is set before everything else because 1-1 is one single personality, and also Amelia is younger. Mingy and Ryan are best friends who have been having some issues with their relationship. They travel through cars dealing with Kez's enemies who act as an overarching villain group by the end. Pretty early on, they meet the cat and god damn it, Ryan, stop flirting with her, what the fuck?
For someone so beautiful, I'm sure we can arrange something.
I respect the moxie, but I've already got plenty.
They learn that their linked number is a unique case and no one really knows how to help them. Min comes to an immature conclusion that Ryan is the one meant to be on the train, and that he's only there by accident. Also, J.K. Simmons is a pig in this season.
Have you brought something tasty for Pig Baby?
Cool. The two boys grow as friends and learn to understand each other's wants in life. Then they turn on each other again. This scene of Ryan getting his door is done so well. No words needed to be spoken to understand that he genuinely considered leaving Min. They start to make up but are attacked by all the enemies from before. I specifically want to point out Nigel. I like Nigel. They meet Morgan, the roommate that Kez talks a lot about, and she's a whole building. She's angry, yells at Kez, and locks the boys in the room of an old passenger she cared about. Later in that episode, we watch Amelia take over the train from the boys' perspective, and that causes their numbers to unlink, I think? I don't know, it's a bit unclear. After jamming out, Min gets his door, but Ryan doesn't. Instead of going through it or talking about it, he just plays on hoping to get Ryan's to show up. Morgan lets the antagonists into her. And to stop the lot from killing them, Kez says sorry. And it works immediately. I'll get to my opinions in a second. Ryan and Min fully make up, get their doors, say goodbye to Kez, and play a show at a bar. And that's the end of the series. This season was definitely on the weaker side, but that's really only compared to the other seasons in the show. Removing it from the other seasons, it's pretty good, and I still like watching it. But there are a few key things that bring it down for me. I'm getting number one out of the way. I don't like Kez. There wasn't a single moment where her character or comedy style clicked with me, and she didn't get that much depth because of how much time was spent on the boys. If you like her, that's great. She just personally wasn't for me. The other thing that didn't work for me was the instant gratification from most of the antagonists with the apology. It was so quick, and I wish it wasn't brushed off like that. Kez's apology to Morgan was better because it was more of an I don't forgive you, but I haven't been perfect about this either. It felt more mature, you know? I think the characters are a bit more inconsistent, and the numbers felt like they didn't matter much because they just kinda stayed the same most of the time. That being said, I love Min and Ryan's dynamic. The cars were pretty fun, and the whole first episode is just really fucking good. For me, this show as a whole is great. Each season has their respective strengths and weaknesses, and I can really respect that because something new always seems to shine. The characters and voices are strong, the style is great, I'm always gonna love those portrait backgrounds, and the themes and stories they tackle are enjoyable and thought-provoking. I give this series a 9. It's probably my third favorite cartoon. So, the last question to answer is what's next for the show? Unfortunately, any news on anything Infinity Train related seems to be dead for now. Owen has talked about how he's wanted to create video games and comics, and has even revealed the ideas and themes he's had for future books. When the Trend Party took off after the show was properly cancelled, he released a mock-up frame for the movie that was going to be Book 5. But that's about it. News on the business side has also been pretty quiet, with only a couple of Cartoon Network social media accounts acknowledging its existence. As for Owen himself, he's moved on to newer projects. But he said he's always ready to jump on another opportunity to get the train moving again.